We are not going for progressivity or redistribution for its own sake. We are designing and implementing policies that stand the best chance of sustaining economic dynamism and building a society that all Singaporeans can truly benefit from. That's the end objective, and we've got to keep that firmly in mind. The litmus test is not how progressive a fiscal system looks. That's not the litmus test. The litmus test is whether it will truly help lower and middle income Singaporeans to have better lives. And that is not a question with straightforward answers in tax policy, in spending policy. And we have to think very hard about those issues. Let me therefore make 4 points that start from that premise. First, when we think about the adjustments we have to make in taxes, we have to think hard about what they mean first for equity and fairness. That's important. What do our taxes mean for equity and fairness? But we also have to think about what they mean for economic dynamism. Dynamism that is needed to support our lower and middle income Singaporeans. That's my first point. Likewise, secondly, for spending. It's not just about spending more, but spending better in achieving our objectives. It's not just about how much we spend, but how we spend. How can we go about it in a way that helps people to stand on their own feet, especially, and that targets benefits at those who need it the most. And in our context too, as I mentioned in the budget speech, and many MPs have mentioned, we have to pay special recognition to the situation of our older Singaporeans, the pioneer generation. So thinking about spending involves targeting, it involves also how we do and not just how much we do. That's the second point. Third point, the government has to work with the community. It's not just about what's in the budget. We have to work with the community in a way that strengthens our VWOs and civic organizations, not just to achieve many helping hands, but to achieve stronger helping hands on the ground. And one reason why Minister Chan Chun Sing has initiated the initiative to have SS, social service officers on the ground, is to strengthen the helping hands on the ground, coordinate better, integrate better, work better across the government, but also work better amongst the FSEs and the voluntary organizations, which is a good point that Faisal Manat made. Strengthen the FSEs. Fourth point, we have to design policies that can be sustained not just for 1 or 2 electoral terms, but for many years after. Fundamental point. So those are 4 points which start from that premise, that it's not progressivity for its own sake, but progressivity that will help to uplift lower and middle income Singaporeans on a sustainable basis. And we think very hard about these issues. We also study what's happening elsewhere, and there are numerous examples of how you get paradoxical results. Many examples. I'll just give you 2 examples. If you look at many of the advanced countries like the United States, good example, the United States. They've been, since the 70s, they've had very significantly enhanced income transfers to the poor, defined in different ways. Single mothers, low-income families, sometimes neighborhood support, many forms of enhanced transfers to the poor. But the poor neighborhoods have not got better, they have got worse. And many more families are disintegrating. Second, unfunded public pension fund liabilities and unfunded commitments to retirees. US is a classic example, Europe even worse example. Not just a problem for budgets, but actually highly regressive, highly inequitable. If you look at what's happening in the US state pension funds, public pension funds at the state level, highly regressive, because they provided year after year, electoral term after electoral term, enhanced commitments and promises, which they now have to keep to retirees who are now going to retire as well as those who have already retired. They can't meet the budget, so current workers have to pay. They're cutting salaries, they're cutting jobs, and they're also cutting the future promises for current workers. Highly regressive, because actually the current generation of retirees are generally on average better off than the current generation of workers. An example of what looked good, looked progressive, but actually was bad not just from a financial sustainability point of view, but just unfair. So these are just two examples. Spending better is as important and more important than how much you spend. And do it with a view to fairness and with a view to efficiency. We will do more in social spending. We've indicated our priorities. And we are doing more especially in the areas that meet our objectives of preserving a dynamic society. Education, housing, work support, and providing some economic security to our retirees, especially the current generation. We're not starting from a state of despair. As Dr. Cha Shi Lu just mentioned, it does mean something that the ERU, in a study of a whole range of countries internationally, had Singapore placed number 6 as the best place to be born next year. Many indicators, you can question some of them, but these are objective indicators. Number 6 in the world. And Dr. Chia also mentioned in healthcare, the latest Bloomberg index of healthcare, of healthiness. Very large number of countries, having 100 and something countries. I had it here myself. Very large number of countries. Singapore was number 1. Number 1 in the world for healthiness. They had 16 indicators of healthiness, risk indicators and other objective indicators. Education, we know how we are ranked. World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report, 3rd best education system, and regularly the PISA and TIMSS reports. Not just because we have top students who do well, but because we have what they call resilient students, that our students from lower socio-economic backgrounds do better than expected compared to the way it is in other countries. So it's quality across the board. That's education. So we're not starting from a position of despair, but we want to do better. We've set out our priorities and we want to do better. Our social policies will evolve, particularly as our society, as our incomes grow slower, as they grow unequally, and as our society gets older.